right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another session in our FinOps Summer Camp. And if you miss any of the first sessions, they are up on our blog, vantage.sh/blog. And of course, this one will be as well. So we put the highlights and then the full recording up there as well. And Session 1 started off with a bang. We had Jean Atelsek join Ben Schechter, the Vantage CEO, and Jean went over some of her findings from her team at 451 Research, and really just gave us kind of the state of play in AI cost management. And then Session 2, we had the engineering team over at Make join us, and they walked us through their framework and how they do their cost observability, and they walked us through their build, instrument, and tune framework, and actually gave us some playbooks as well. And today we're talking about managing AI budgets in the age of tokenmaxxing. Now, it actually kind of shows you how fast things move these days, because I don't know, when we were putting these webinars together a few months ago, everyone was talking about tokenmaxxing, and maybe we'll be, we're a little bit past that now, and the guys will break that down for us. But this is really all about how we're getting the most out of our current tokens. And I've heard people call it, value maxing. I'm sure there's plenty of other terms that are going around right now. But let me introduce you to the two estimable gentlemen that will be joining us today for this webinar. We have Augusto Leal and Rem Baumann. And I'll do a quick intro for each, and I'll let each of them say hi as well. So Rem Baumann is the director of product here at Vantage. And before Vantage, he spent 5 years at AWS as an optimization solutions architect, helping enterprises get their cloud spend under control. And before that, he was a business and technology consultant at Accenture. He also is a certified FinOps practitioner. So, with all that said, he definitely knows a thing or two about today's topic. Rem, welcome, and anything that I missed?
No, thanks, Brandon. Great to be here. I don't know if I'll bring as good adjectives as you for some descriptions later, but really great to be here and excited to talk about tokenmaxxing.
Cool. Appreciate it. And then Augusto Leal is a sales engineer here at Vantage, working with teams on their cloud and AI costs. And he came up through both finance and engineering with some time at JP Morgan Chase as an analyst, as a software engineer, and also as a startup founder. So I think this blend is why he's the right person to walk us through engineering and finance and give us that view on today's session. Augusto, welcome, and anything else you want to add?
Thanks, Brandon. Excited to be here. Excited to share our perspective on tokenmaxxing, and really looking forward to the content we have for you guys today.
Cool. Good stuff. Well, just a few quick housekeeping announcements before we actually dive into the content itself. Yes, of course, this webinar is being recorded, and just like the other sessions, we'll post the quick recap, some of the highlights, and the full replay itself on our blog tomorrow. We'll send that out to all the registrants today. And of course, use that Q&A module if you have any questions for Augusto and Rem. Again, there's the chat module, and then there's also a Q&A module. Using that Q&A module is going to be the best way to make sure we see it. I know sometimes chat can go quick and get buried, but please use that Q&A module. We'll take all the questions at the end, but feel free as we're going through the actual content today, throw it in the Q&A module there. Okay, with all that said, enough from me. Let's actually hand it over and let's start talking about what is tokenmaxxing.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I appreciate it. Obviously, the topic of conversation today is what is tokenmaxxing. So we should probably level set a definition. And really, it's the practice of running up massive AI token spend or consumption as a proxy of productivity. And it's become something that's been pervasive in the tech ecosystem, where token usage equates productivity. And we'll see that that's not necessarily the case, but it's important to kind of understand how we got here. So if we go to the next slide, we can really see that the history of AI is relatively new. only in 2022 ChatGPT landed. It feels like a prehistoric times before then, but it was only 4 years ago. And then obviously in 2026, and around February, the craze around, hey, how much burned tokens equates to kind of lines of code in terms of developer efficiency and productivity. And so a lot of organizations started adopting leaderboards based on, who was being most productive based on how much token usage, and measuring that. In reality, this is not really a sustainable practice because obviously tokens cost money. They're not free. But what we're finding is that it's not a complete trade-off. Whereas we're now seeing that a lot of folks that are in, progressive state of mind from a FinOps perspective are really able to not only increase their frontier model usage, but at the same time, through efficient allocation of how they set up the models, what models are good for what task, how do we set up KV caching, all of these different variables allow for not only more model usage, but also actually measuring more productivity, which is the next natural evolution to token maxing.
Perfect. Thanks, Brandon. Um, it's been an interesting trend with token maxing. I feel like it, as Augusto was showing on the timeline, it kind of passed as quickly as it went. And for me at least, this is like not a new trend just when it comes to development and technology. Seen this many times before, some of the early coding days where people were looking to measure developer productivity and maybe measuring things such as lines as code. Back in my AWS days, where people were, steadily migrating to the cloud, a lot of times people were just measuring their cloud adoption in terms of number of workloads moved to the cloud, only to realize that without proper optimization and design of this architecture, that you actually end up spending more money. And so people very quickly realized that not only is tokens consumed a little bit of a vanity metric, but also discovered in the process that AI is potentially one of the most hyperbolic costs that we've experienced in the tech landscape. Again, with some cloud comparisons, some of the early days of serverless compute is a great a comparison where people were moving a lot of things over without just properly right sizing or even creating the right observability in order to understand if this was going to be right for their workload or not. And we've seen all of those AI costs running away quite quickly. So what we're here to talk about is like how you actually properly measure that, as well as what are the guardrails that you're going to need to put in place in order to get there. So Vantage, for us, this is a 4-step guide to actually being able to observe and monitor and govern your AI costs. It starts with the age-old FinOps foundation of gaining visibility and ensuring that you have all of the proper dimensions and cardinality within your data to actually be able to allocate that, as well as where you're not able to do direct allocations, proxy measurements for some of those shared services or other things that are not directly translatable to one attribute. And performing that cost allocation for showback and chargeback and things like that. Once you have some of that, you're actually able to do some of your measure and value justification. A lot of these can be done in isolation, but really this takes a full landscape of KPIs that you're measuring to be able to paint a full picture. So we'll go over some of the things that we're using, and then actually setting the budgets and guardrails. Once you're actually understanding what is the value that you're getting out of tokens, and maybe for some of your developers, for example, what is a suitable budget for their AI usage? How do you actually implement a budget and give them a number to hit, and then implement guardrails for them to actually ensure that they're not blowing past that budget? So getting into cost visibility a little bit here, this is where FinOps for AI has been the biggest differentiator between what was traditionally done in the cloud. These costs are sprawling more than ever before. We have new SKUs, we have a lot of new vendors, and so one of the biggest things has been able to get that centralized pane of glass and also to get the granularity that you need here. Within the AI usage and consumption itself as well, we're having all these new categories of AI that I think people traditionally all bucketed together. We have application AI, where people are embedding AI into their actual enterprise applications. Your own enterprise consumption, so developers and even other roles now that are now using consumption-based AI apps that you now have to be monitoring in addition to your infrastructure, and not only doing that monitoring, but also classifying what is attributed to your actual cost of goods sold versus R&D budget. So you can't just absolutely now move all of your infrastructure costs into each of those buckets. You also then have people that are building their own hosted inference and using some new providers like Modal or Base 10 and hosting their own inference infrastructure where you're not billed per request and you actually have to find ways of allocating out the cost of that based on the value that you're getting from your hosted inference. And primarily the biggest problem with all of these that we just discussed is that what you actually need to perform your allocation based on is not in the billing data. If you are embedding telemetry within your requests about maybe for an enterprise application, like who is the end consumer, maybe you have a chatbot that all of your customers are using, you need to be able to know which of your customers are causing the most cost for you, whether you charge those customers or not. It's very important for mapping back to your own margins on each of your customers. For some of the enterprise AI, that's where a lot of the value measure is going to come into play. How much are each of your developers using and how much efficiency are they actually getting from their usage and consumption? And then all of the various, proxy metrics that you are needing to allocate out potentially some of those shared costs or static costs from something like an inference provider. How do you determine your allocation methodology for that? So bringing in all of those additional business metrics and telemetry is going to be one of the things that's most important, something that we've been focusing on Vantage to be able to get all of the attributes that are necessary in order for viewing your cloud costs. Then getting into how do you actually allocate some of these costs? Again, you first of all need to ensure that you are having the attributes necessary where you are doing a one-to-one map for some of the things that are included in your costs. Using the chatbot example for actually bringing in some of your telemetry data for something like an AI chatbot, being able to attribute that back to the exact customer or feature within your application is very important for understanding the cost of specific customers or features, respectively. And then if it's also a service that is maybe consumed by multiple teams, being able to differentiate between API keys or even within the same API key, different request types that are being driven by different teams, whether it maybe be a feature engineering team or a data engineering team, for example. Then actually viewing some of those costs, ensuring that those are normalized across all of the providers. People are using a lot of solutions such as AI gateways to be able to freely move between different AI vendors. Obviously, a lot of developers are using lots of different AI tools. And so having this normalization so that you can actually view things such as the model, the user, the context window, all of these different attributes that are scaled across all these different vendors need to be compared in order to actually create baselines. Lastly, again, then starting to analyze some of those things that are not in that first bucket of one-to-one mapping, where you need to identify different proxy metrics. If you are doing something like your own hosted inference, maybe it actually is that your log telemetry is how you want to do your allocation, even though the actual billing from those providers is not per request. But you need to actually figure out your cost per request, and that becomes a part of how you evaluate if it is worthwhile to actually host your own inference versus go through a direct provider, among other different variables that are a part of that process. But all things required to actually perform allocation and get 100% coverage and chargeback of your usage. Then we finally getting to measuring that value that we were talking about a little bit earlier and what is actually worthwhile when it comes to actually spending AI. And this has been, I think, the most hotly debated topic in the last month or two. And people are still a little bit unsure of what actual measurements they should be using. That's something certainly our customers and prospect customers are asking us all the time. And if you ask me, there's not one single metric that can actually guide this, and mostly because there are ways of gaming the system for any metric that you do or measure, and that's why it's very important to be measuring this holistically. So, for example, you could be attempting to bring down your tokens per PR by making smaller PRs, but that might not actually help in your cost per feature. And you can have people easily game as well their cache hit ratios by reusing prompts, but that's going to eventually end up exploding their eventual end bill. So keeping a wide range of KPIs, I think, is my first recommendation in terms of how you actually measure these, but ensuring that they're all value based. And then first, we've talked about these various different forms of allocation, whether it be one-to-one or proxy-based telemetry. First, you have to align the various measures of value to your organization, so that your allocation can go up the hierarchy, especially when it comes to potentially like developer level consumption. It's going to be a lot more important to your CFO if your organization is generally on budget compared to a single developer. And then also same thing goes for all of your applications within your total cost of goods sold, ensuring that the whole of the application, the enterprise is on track, where we have so much variable costs within the AI. Then also starting to set up a lot of the different specific views that are necessary for a lot of the different value measure behind AI. We have a couple of examples here that, again, all kind of play into each other. Things like the ratio of models that your developers are consuming, the cache hit ratio, the cost per developer, and then also bringing this into actual value-based measurements. So your cost per end customer, your cost per linear ticket. All of these, you can watch the trend of all of these over time. The obvious objective is that you want to be increasing all of these, so or making them each more efficient, and that can be moving numbers up or down, but having historical trends and identifying where you want to get, and also using these value measures to identify what is the most impactful business driver, is going to be the things that you can then communicate to your engineers, whether it's based on their own consumption or things that you need to be specifically managing and adapting within your enterprise applications for AI use of what you need to be focusing on. Lastly, then, once you have defined the amount of value that you're getting out of the AI, maybe it is the amount of AI that you are willing to provide in terms of credits to your developers. Maybe it is what you are willing to spend in terms of your application-based AI, actually defining the budgets, and then what you do once those budgets are hit. There are obviously a lot of things that you can potentially do when a budget is hit, whether it is downgrading models, stopping usage altogether, and you need to make those decisions up front because they have very different effects. From a enterprise use, obviously you don't want to be fully stopping your developers. You want them to continue to be able to be productive. As Augusto mentioned, at this point, I think that everyone that is now in the coding world is fully reliant on their productivity through AI. But do you downgrade some of the model usage? When it comes to actual application-based AI, I think that this is even a more difficult question because your end users are the ones that are dealing with the brunt of any changes that you're making here. If you need to downgrade your model because you blew your budget, it is impacts to them. And so you might not have as much tolerance for blowing that budget, but you might need to find ways or different methodologies for improving some of your other metrics and measures of value, such as your cache hit, to be able to actually bring down those budgets. And that is where both having actual dollar and token-based budgets as well as value-based budgets become very important. So deciding on your methodology for each of these and deciding how you safely fail over is kind of the last key here in terms of solving what you need.
All right, great. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Augusto, why don't you? I'll let you take over.
Sounds good. Assuming everyone can see my screen, okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So just at the foundational level, before we kind of get into some of the AI visibility tooling that we provide, is what makes Vantage really unique is that we have these native integrations across providers. And we originally were focused really on cloud providers such as AWS, Azure, GCP. But as the AI providers have really grown in scope, we do provide native integrations to OpenAI, Anthropic, Cursor, and it's really easy to get up and running. You just connect your cloud API and cloud enterprise admin API keys into Vantage, and that way we're able to ingest the billing reports, which really gives us a unanimous schema across different providers, which gives us a single pane view into how your AI spend is orchestrating. And with that single schema, we're really able to slice the data, whether it's, hey, we're interested in AI spend by provider, by model, seeing which users on our team are heavy users versus others that might not be using it as intelligently, which AI applications are using AI, consuming AI, and all that data we can get on a much granular level. So if we look at, for example, AI spend by provider, right off the bat here, I can see that Cursor is kind of the leading provider in terms of AI spend. But in addition, I can really drill down into different subcategories and really get a much more granular understanding of, hey, where is this usage coming from? Is it from, our license? Is it from usage-based pricing? Or is it other fees? And really get a deeper understanding. So I can click down even further into usage-based consumption and see which users and which accounts are really responsible for a lot of the charges. And we can see here that, hey, this individual, our CTO and co-founder has had a significant spike in usage. I trust his judgment. Whereas, if I find myself on this list, maybe I need to kind of cut down my Cursor spend because it might not be as optimal. In addition, we can really drill down by, hey, what does AI spend look like from a model by model perspective? I can see which models, hey, are we using Fable 5 when really Opus 4.6 will do the job, so on and so forth across the different providers in one single pane of view. And I can really drill down into, where are these charges coming from? Is it from, token usage? Is it cloud co-work? Is it cloud chat? So on and so forth. And then within the tokens category, I can really drill down into the subcategory and see where are the biggest cost driver. Is it, uncached inputs? Yeah, how much is caching costing me? How much is cache reading costing me? And then what is the output? And with this data, we're able to get a lot more granularity as to how to fine tune our model utilization practice in an organization once that visibility is commonplace. And this is not only for the finance folks, but for the engineers who are actually utilizing AI, and also for the rest of the org to get them educated on the best practices in terms of how to utilize their resources. Taking that a step further, we've created a cost report for a fictional user base here, and we can really drill down into a single user and set a budget for that user. For example, right here, you can see this yellow line is the budget and how they're spending across different providers against that budget. And with this, each cost report, we can create anomaly detection, we can create alerting so that you can really stay ahead of the AI cost race. Rem, back to you on the agents, as this is more kind of our frontier of the possibilities of what we're able to do with Vantage and AI spend management.
Absolutely. As I was mentioning a little bit earlier, the biggest thing we've been discovering as of late is the lack of transparency within a lot of the native costs that are coming from these providers. So the newest features and functionality within Vantage is being able to support telemetry-based cost allocation for some of our various AI providers, as well as some of the underlying technologies behind it. So vendor-based logs, AI gateways, all these different tools and feature sets that are now emitting much more granular information about usage, but do not include cost data out of the box. So what Augusto is showing is actually a version where we are piping in some of the Anthropic logs to join on our Anthropic costs here and split out between the different agents that are being run. What are the costs here? And these are agents that are all using a similar API key. So within the costs that are provided by Anthropic, something that is totally undifferentiated, but once you join on logs, you're able to get some of this additional information. So when you're actually tagging some of your specific requests or invocations, maybe that's by the agent that's using them, maybe that's by the user, maybe it's by the end customer, you are able to actually bring that information and join it onto the cost data and get that level of visibility within Vantage. Going as well one step further, again, kind of then talking about some of the value measure, you can bring in some of that usage and look at the actual value that's being produced, whether it is through application-based AI or enterprise AI. So what Augusto is showing you is a canvas within Vantage. It is our agent-based report, where you can see on the left, a simple prompt will create a report for you, and this is continually updated. This report type, as well as our agent, also now supports MCP connections. So the Vantage platform can bring in other sources of truth, things like GitHub, or in this case, Linear, to bring in ancillary metrics that you might want to measure value on. So in this prompt, we are asking to look at some of our fictitious organization that Augusto was mentioning and their actual productivity compared to their tokens consumed from something like Cursor or Claude Code. And you can see represented in this, we have both their consumption in both dollars and tokens, and comparing that to their linear issues. And we're rendering this in the end cost per developer. You can also get this in tokens, but this actually allows you to see which of your developers are being the most efficient when it comes to actually closing linear issues for your organization. So once you have some of that base level allocation, in this example, the allocation back to each individual developer, joining it on some of those value metrics that you can pipe into a platform such as Vantage, you're able to get one step further and actually figuring out if your AI is efficient and where you actually need to be a little bit more efficient in your usage.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's open it up to questions. So let me just let me throw my screen back on here. Again, go ahead and throw your questions into that Q&A box here, and we'll get to them. If we don't get to them all, we'll follow up with you individually, but we do have some time here for a few questions. Okay, so starting off, how do you break out AI spend that's buried inside a bigger bill, like Bedrock hiding inside AWS? Rem, I'll give this one to you since you have a little experience with AWS.
Yeah, absolutely. Bedrock specifically is an interesting one as well because at least traditionally up until some recent changes with the Curve 2.0 that none of this actually fell under the Bedrock service because a lot of it was procured through Marketplace. So a couple of ways of actually breaking this out. First is through some of our virtual tags, and this is where a lot of our customers are actually classifying a lot of their spend when it comes to defining what is and what is not AI-based consumption. So virtual tags can help in specifically identifying the services that are AI-based. At Vantage as well, we're also working on building managed tags that are actually managed on your behalf for a lot of these different categorizations, both related to what is and is not AI spend, as well as normalized AI types of measures, such as model or user or context window or something like that. And so there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. But then being able to specifically filter and group those together is how you would view that within Vantage.
All right, very good. All right, we have another question coming in here. Okay, we've seen the demo of cost allocation and budgeting. How do we provide optimization recommendations on AI spend? Augusto, do you want to tackle this one, and then we can hand it over to Rem to add
Yeah.
anything else?
But really, right now, we're at the frontier of discovering that. But what we find is that the first point of contact is really ownership around visibility in terms of getting engineers and other folks on the team to have an understanding of what's going on. And then that will kind of naturally segue into recommendations. But I'll let kind of Rem follow up as well.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting topic because there's a lot of context that goes into actually defining optimizations. Um, First, again, kind of like defining what was achieved uh, by AI usage is the first step, I think, in understanding, do you need to optimize it? I certainly know from our own development team where using Fable can and cannot be something that is justifiable. And it really is hard to present that context in a unbiased way without actually knowing outcomes. And so I think, first of all, more so than just a static cost recommendation, something that I think people are traditionally familiar with from cloud environments is more just framing usage in a way of understanding if it was worthwhile or not. It's also interesting because you start to see as well some of these prompt compactors and things like that. And there's been a lot of studies released lately that show that actually it ends up consuming more tokens on the output side because a lot more reasoning has to be done because of the amount of context compression that has been done. So, as Augusto was mentioning, I think that really where the biggest optimizations can be done here is actually translating some of this to value. I think there's some of the easy things that you can see, which are things like what are your cache hit ratios, what are your model blend for a specific user, and looking, for example, at a developer level, are they actually switching to maybe something like Sonnet when they have the opportunity to do so? But I would fall back more to the value measure today, in light of other types of optimization that can be done.
Cool. Very good. All right, Faraz, or I hope I said that right. Thanks for the question. All right, the next one, Nick here. Are virtual tags only a Vantage construct? What data pipeline would measure that where the virtual tags can be applied to?
Yeah, that is a Vantage construct. Essentially, within the Vantage product, we offer a middleware layer to apply additional tags to any consumption that is measured within Vantage, whether that be cloud infrastructure, AI infrastructure, things like that. It's helpful for us in a couple of ways. Going back to when virtual tags originated and virtual tags were created, it's often quite hard to actually get your developers to actually fully tag all of your resources. And from some of these cloud providers, there is even usage type that they still have not allowed for tags to be applied to them. So not only does this allow you to extrapolate and put that as a middleware layer for actually tagging resources, but you can also do that in bulk. And you don't have to apply it to individual resources. Within Vantage, you can use business logic. Um, you could do this in any other way if you're not using Vantage, basically using um, proxy proxy measures. Maybe it's like an account number, but I think some of the value of having something like Vantage to do that is that we have not only all of the different variables to be able to assign groups in bulk, but a lot of our cost allocation methodologies are also driven by virtual tags. So if you want to do an allocation of a shared resource or just a bucket of unknown costs, you can do that in a percentage-based fashion. You can use proxy costs. So maybe you want to assign something like support out proportional to everyone's AWS consumption. And then you can also pipe in business metrics, maybe like a CPU utilization of a shared Kubernetes cluster to be able to actually allocate those out in different ways.
All right, very good. Maybe time for one more question here. Okay, how do you get engineers to care about costs without making them afraid to go for the expensive model when it's the right model to use? Any thoughts there, Rem?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think that it first comes down to what are you getting out of it. Again, we've seen a lot of engineers have a lot of success using Fable within our own organization, but I think that we've come to the point and already had some of our own cost anomalies in this area that show that cost can be driven up quite quickly. I think it's also important to then just mostly be able to show them some of the other metrics that we discussed. Things like model mix and cache hit ratio. Like, are you actually, one, falling back to other models when you have the ability to do so? Two, are you, if you're designing an enterprise application, properly caching a lot of the responses that are frequently used? and actually just evaluating a lot of these different metrics altogether rather than one particular one in a vacuum.
Right. Very good. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. That was a great session. And again, everyone out there, we are going to put the replay up with our highlights on the blog. And just really quick, I'll flash this because it's the obligatory slide here. And while I do that, Augusto, Rem, where can people connect with you, chat more with you if they have any questions? Rem, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, always available on LinkedIn. Also, Advantage, we have a community Slack that I am in, as well as in the FinOps Foundation Slack. Feel free to reach out to me in any of those areas.
Very good. And Augusto.
Yeah, likewise. Feel free to continue the conversation on LinkedIn and happy to answer further questions.
Very good. All right. Well, that will do it for the summer series that we have here. So thank you everyone again for joining us. And we got a great reception on this series. So we're looking at putting another one together in the fall. So keep your eyes out for that. But I think that is it for today. Thank you again, everyone. And we'll see you all soon. Cheers.
Thanks everyone for joining.